Grandma, I'm going out. Will you be okay by yourself? My grandmother is 85 years old. She's in good health, but I'm still worried about her. What are you talking about? I'm still young. But I heard there have been a lot of door-to-door salesmen around here lately, so if anyone comes, just ignore them. Don't worry. Who do you think I am? My grandmother said and waved her hand at me. My name is Heather. I am 26 years old and I have an office job. I live with my parents, my grandparents, and my older brother. My father and brother also work in an office, and my mom is a housewife. We try to make sure my elderly grandmother is never left alone. My grandmother has always had a very vivacious spirit. She says she's fine, but once she fell and hurt herself when she was alone. So I still worry about her. My parents, my brother, and I all take shifts, so someone is usually home. I never thought it would turn out this way. But on this particular day, my grandmother happened to be home alone. I was out shopping and had been gone for about 2 hours when I received a message from her that was addressed to my family. You see, she uses a smartphone designed for seniors. It has minimal functionality like phone calls and simple messages. She wrote, "Door-to-door salesman for water purifier?" I only had to read that much before I began to panic. I had just recently heard a story about a door-to-door salesman in my neighborhood who was very aggressive about getting people to sign contracts. My mother would not be home from her part-time job yet, and my grandmother would be the only one at home. So I rushed to the station and jumped on the train towards home. I arrived about 30 minutes after receiving my grandmother's message. When I got there, I found an unfamiliar pair of shoes on my doorstep. They must belong to the door-to-door salesman. Hurriedly, I opened the front door. "Hi, Heather. Welcome home." My grandmother looked up as she sipped her tea. The salesman looked at me and smiled. Perhaps he assumed from my age and gender that I was all right. He was a man in his 30s, and he spoke with a very fake smile. He acted very familiar with me. He asked my grandmother, "Grandchild, how old is he? You may not know it at such a young age, but water plays an important role in your health. We want to give you the best water quality for your family." My grandmother looked at me, humming and hawing as she awaited my response. She told me, "They're going around testing the water quality around here, and if a family's street is dirty, they'll leave a water filter for free." She looked at the salesman who said, "Well then, are you ready to test the water quality?" She nodded and got up from her seat to the kitchen tap. She filled a glass with water and brought it to the salesman. He reached into his bag, pulled out a bottle of some chemical, and dropped it into the water. The color of the water suddenly changed. "Look how the water has changed color. This is proof that the water is very dirty. You're not drinking this water, are you?" I felt he was putting a tremendous pressure on me. I started to tell him that we had a water filter, but he acted as if he was really concerned about our health. "But with the quality of your water," he said, "even washing our hands is a health hazard." "How dirty is our water?" I asked. "How is that possible?" The salesman began to spread out pamphlets on the table and began to describe the free water purifier he was giving away. And when he was finally done, he said, "But we recommend this one. We recommend this top-of-the-line water purifier, priced at just $5,999.99. What? I couldn't help but exclaim. My grandmother also looked surprised. The salesman looked at her and said, "I've been waiting for this for a long time." He explained to my grandmother that this top-of-the-line water purifier would remove impurities to the utmost limit, and that it would also be good for beauty and health. He even told her that her illness would be cured by drinking this water over time. Then, my grandmother's eyes changed. She said, "If it's as good as you say, I'll talk to my family about it." Actually, this is a special offer price. If you wait, you will need to pay the full price of $1 million. But if you buy now, you can take advantage of this special offer of $5,999.99. He was as hypnotizing as a late-night TV infomercial. I was feeling suspicious, but to my surprise, my grandmother exclaimed, "I'll take 5. Come on, if it's such a great product, it must be inexpensive, right?" The salesman nodded yes, but we knew that wasn't true. "Grandma, you don't really need 5, do you? You can't just decide on something like this." "But I'm the owner of this place." When my grandmother says something like that, I know she absolutely will not back down. "But 5 things costing $5,999.99? She looked somewhat stubborn. "I'm the owner of this place, so you don't need to talk to anyone about it," she said. The salesman's eyes glimmered. "Well, let's move on to the contract." The salesman put something that looked like a contract on the table. The salesman asked her to write down her name, address, and signature binding the contract. Right then, I forced my way in and said, "What kind of company is this, anyway?" The salesman smiled condescendingly at me and said, "I apologize. I haven't introduced myself, have I? I am the water quality inspector commissioned by the official water department." With that, he pulled out his business card. "I've never heard of this company," I said. But the salesman didn't pay any attention to me. My grandmother continued filling out the contract. Then she stopped. "Excuse me, is this the final contract document? And just to be sure, there is a cooling off period, right?" The salesman snickered. "There are some other documents, but you can read those later. Also, since you're receiving this very special offer, you won't need a cooling off period. The sale will be final." "No cooling off period? What?" I exclaimed. "What?" replied the salesman. I was completely taken aback. "The cooling off policy is for people who aren't sure they want to buy," he said. "The old lady has already shown a firm intention to buy, correct? You can't just go taking back everything. I know you're young, but don't be naive." He was making fun of me, so I said, "But that's not true. The cooling off period for door-to-door sales is 8 days. The salesman turned away from me and began telling her that the payment was to be made in one lump sum and all in cash. She got up and left the room. Then the salesman went to the kitchen to begin installing the water purifier. He said he only had that one to install because he didn't have any more in stock today. When he finished, my grandmother returned. She was carrying a thick paper bag in her hand. I wondered, is that bag full of cash? We never keep cash in the house. I wonder if it was my grandmother's savings or something. Just as she was about to hand the bag to the salesman, the front door opened. It was my mother. The salesman waved as if in a panic. "I've been sent by the water department." For a moment, I saw my mother's eyes light up. She laughed and asked what was going on. The salesman was about to explain when the front door opened again. This time, it was my father. The salesman looked at him with surprise. introduced himself again, and showed him the water purifier. My father began asking him questions. What were these impurities? Would a top-of-the-line water purifier really have health benefits? What evidence was there to support such a purification system? The salesman rattled off explanation after explanation. He looked tired by the time he was finished. Well, I'll be back tomorrow to install the rest of the water purifiers. Then, the salesman grabbed the paper bag from my grandmother and ran towards the door. But just then, the front door opened and there was my brother. The salesperson, looking rather frazzled, looked at him and giggled. I was commissioned by the water department. I wonder how many times he had said that. The salesman tried to exit, but my brother blocked his way. He asked, "Did you try to sell something to us? You're not trying to scam my family, are you?" "He sure did," I jumped in. The salesman looked flustered. "No, of course it's not a scam. We have an official contract, so don't worry. I was just about to leave." My brother is a trainer at a gym and enjoys working out. He was so strong that he made the salesperson look weak. The salesman, perhaps realizing this, smiled and tried to walk away, but my brother wasn't having any of that. Looking pale, the salesman returned to the living room. My brother asked, "Who came home first? Was it you, Heather?" I nodded. The salesman, surrounded by my family, sat down reluctantly. I explained in a matter-of-fact tone. He said he was commissioned by the water department, and he pointed in that direction. But the water department is really in this direction. Doesn't that indicate a common scammer? The salesman's face hardened as he smiled amicably at me. I continued. He performed a water quality test. This guy took a glass of water from Grandma's faucet and added a chemical. It changed the color of the water, and he told us this proved that our water was dirty. But any old dye will change the water no matter what. The salesman's eyes shifted back and forth nervously as I went on. First, he said he'd give us a free water purifier, but then he changed his story. He said our water was so dirty that he recommends this top-of-the-line purifier at $5,999.99, a discount off the regular price of $1 million. A special limited-time offer, right? I looked the salesperson right in the eye, and he nodded. His eyes were swimming. He didn't bother explaining any of the details of the contract, told us we could read them later. Then he said since it's a limited time offer, there would be no cooling off period. The salesperson nodded, blue in the face, looking like he was about to run away. He said that washing the vegetables we eat with our tap water will make us sick, and drinking it would be out of the question. Supposedly, this top-of-the-line water purifier removes impurities to the utmost limit, and there are reports of people being cured of illnesses just by drinking it. But I know the truth. The truth is that this water purifier was discontinued about 5 years ago because of problems, I declared as I pointed at the water heater the salesman had installed. Sweating bullets, the salesman retorted, "That's not true." But I was confident. It is true. It's a well-known fact in the industry. I would know because I worked there. With that, I handed the salesperson my business card. The salesperson saw this and became more and more pale. The sales clerk's face turned so pale that I wondered if people's complexions could change this much. I work for a well-known manufacturer that also sells water servers. I had studied water quality testing in college, so I knew that the salesman's explanation was mostly bull. Besides, most of these door-to-door salespeople are predatory. I hear about it all the time in this industry. But this salesman was about to be out of luck. He must have thought he struck gold with my sweet old grandmother all by herself. I bet he never thought he would stumble upon a house with family members in the industry. It so happens that my father is also a successful salesman. That's how he knew what questions to ask a scamming salesman and expose his lies. Just then, my mother pulled her phone out and pointed it at the salesman, who was pale and speechless. My mother informed us that she had recorded everything that had happened since she walked in the door. She thought it was a scam as soon as she received my grandma's message, so she came into the house prepared. Finally, my mother said, "You've been tricking elderly neighbors into buying expensive water purifiers, haven't you? Is that your scam?" The salesman's voice was faint. The salesman said, in a hushed voice, "I have a contract with—" "I almost wish I had your nerve. You're gutsy, aren't you?" my mother interrupted. That's when I jumped in. But the only person who has been cheated here is you. You said there is no cooling off period, but in fact, there is. This is a contract document and it must be written up properly. This doesn't even have the address of your company. This contract is useless. My company trained me well on signing contract documents because there are malicious people in the same business. This contract isn't in the gray area. In fact, it's a complete and total scam. The salesman looked at me with vacant eyes, as if he had lost the energy to argue with me. It's outrageous to make people sign a contract with you without explaining it properly in the contract document. Is your company by any chance the one that sold this discontinued water purifier? I thought they had gone out of business, but have they changed their name? If so, is it your intention to recover your debt by selling this useless water purifier at a high price? I believe that company was a newcomer to the market, and I don't think you are the president, but is it a family business or something? I took a guess at the end, and it seemed I got it right. The salesperson, with tears in his eyes, said that the president of the company was actually his father. The company was small and the family was on the street, so he had no choice but to turn to door-to-door sales. Our family laughed when we heard this. Then my brother said, "You're a scammer because you've lost your way? Well, I'm sure those tears are in Act 2. If you were lost on the street, you wouldn't be driving a luxury car to a business. That car parked on the corner there, that's your car, isn't it?" I was curious because I saw an unfamiliar luxury car parked on the corner across the street from my house as I was coming home. When my brother came home, the front door was open. The salesman must have wanted to make a speedy getaway because I saw him unlock the mysterious car with a remote key. It infuriated me that he was scamming us so that he could drive a luxury car. A friend of my grandmother, a neighbor couple in the same town, were so upset because they had been scammed by a door-to-door salesman. However, since they didn't leave any information or contact, there was nothing she could do except cry herself to sleep. When my grandmother found herself home alone, she got the idea as the salesman approached her door. If this was the person who had scammed her neighbors, she wanted to take on that villain. So she vowed, "If a door-to-door salesman comes to my house, I'm going to show him." So, when he approached, she sent the message to our family so we would rush home to help her. The data recorded by my mother's tact, the water purifier that was said to be of the highest quality, and the appropriate contract documents were enough evidence of fraud. My grandmother called the neighbors and asked them to come over immediately. When they saw the salesman's face, they confirmed he was a fraudster, so now they had to ask the police to come. The salesman was taken to the police station because he was caught red-handed in the act of fraud. There was quite a commotion, but within a few days, all the neighbors who were victims of the scam were successfully reimbursed for their losses. The salesman was arrested for fraud, but I don't know what happened to him after that. By the way, Grandma, you shouldn't be saving your money in paper bags. "What are you talking about?" she replied. "You gave me a paper bag with the money for the water purifier. How much was in it?" Then my grandmother left the room as if she had just remembered and came right back with that paper bag in her hand. She handed it to me, and I opened it and laughed. Inside the paper bag was a comic book magazine wrapped in a scarf. When I asked her what she would have done if we had given it to the salesperson and they had found out right away, she said, "I would have told them that I highly recommend this magazine, and I wanted to make an impassioned plea for you to read it." Indeed, this is my grandmother's favorite magazine. She has been reading it for ages. She laughed. I was convinced then that she was still clever and in good health. Our house was filled with laughter that day.